Hi everybody, Greyfist here. I'm sorry for the delay in my videos. I got really busy for a couple weeks, but now I'm hoping that things have settled down just enough that I can squeeze in a few videos here and there. This one's been on my mind for quite a while though, and so I wanted to make it first before several of the others that I'm currently rolling over in the back of my head. And that is why Fox News is, in my opinion, the most dangerous entity facing the United States and the United States democracy in general. And I know that might sound like a bit of an overstatement, but I believe that I have a pretty good case for this, so I hope that you'll hear me out. Alright, so the first tenet of my position here is that Fox News is a source of misinformation, so I'm going to explain how I know that and why it's terrible for the United States and democracy in general. A recent study by Fairleigh Dickinson University found that relative to their counterparts who listen to NPR or who watch CNN, Fox News viewers are not only less informed, they are also more misinformed, which means they know less about what's happening, and the things that they think they know are wrong more often than their counterparts. In fact, the study found that if you watched no news whatsoever, if you took in no news media at all, you would do better in surveys regarding current events than you would if you had watched Fox News as a regular news source. And that is terrible. Now, why is it terrible? Well, in order for a democracy to work, the voters have to have some idea of what's going on with policy so that they can make decisions regarding the politicians that they choose to elect. So, for example, if you have a politician representing you and he or she has voted in a way that does not please you, then you can vote for someone else who says or claims that they will vote differently. But if that politician is allowed to lie to you and say that they didn't vote that way, or that there was some incorrect reason why they voted, if they were able to make something up about the bill, for example, that you supported that made it seem like it was really bad, for example, Obamacare and death panels, then you won't really know why or who you should be voting for and who you should not be voting for. You will be basing your decisions on misinformation. And democracy can't function if the population is ignorant of what its government is doing. And it is my firm belief that Fox News promotes lies about what our government is doing. Now, this isn't to say that no other news media misrepresents what the government is doing. It's also not to say that the government itself misrepresents what it is doing. But I believe that Fox News is particularly guilty of it and does it deliberately. It is my opinion that they act as the propaganda wing for the Republican Party. And so the Republican Party decides that they want to demonize everything that government really does, but particularly the government aspects that Democrats do. And so when Republican voters, who primarily are the base of Fox News viewership, when they go to vote, they're not really voting on what Democrats or Republicans have actually been doing. They're voting based on what they have heard from Fox News, which is often misinformation. So that's very damaging. The other thing that Fox News does is that it promotes this false equal and balanced, right? Oftentimes they will have two guests on with the host, and one of them will be this handsome, well-spoken Republican, or this attractive, very intelligent female Republican, and then they'll have some kind of, weenie type Democrat who's not even a real Democrat. He or she might even be just like a Dino, Democrat in name only, or someone who's really moderate, who doesn't really represent what the Democratic Party stands for, or only does to a certain extent. And then they'll have this debate as though the two sides are actually equally balanced, when in reality they're pitting perhaps the best the Republican Party has to offer against some facsimile of what the Democratic Party stands for. And so, of course, anyone who's watching this is going to believe that the Republican side is the stronger side of the argument. But the reality is that you're not witnessing an actual fair and balanced argument. It only looks balanced because there are two people there. It's not actually balanced in content. Finally, the third thing that that Fox News does is that they promote polarization of the parties. And I say this because anytime a Republican senator or representative tries to reach across the aisle to work with Democrats to come to some sort of compromise that favors both sides, Fox News is the first to jump on that Republican and label them basically a traitor to the cause. And so anytime that a Republican does that, they basically have to go back and say, oh, well, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that, or else they're not going to get reelected again, because the population is only, the Republican voting population is only hearing what Fox News says. And if they are repeatedly told that this Republican is a traitor to the cause and he's really a liberal, he's not going to get reelected. And so any kind of compromise is basically impossible when we have this sort of polarized journalism. The last thing that I'll say about misinformation, and this is a little bit of a tricky subject, but I'll venture into it cautiously. Very recently, one of the Fox News anchors, I think his name is Mike Bowling, made some very sexist and derogatory comments about a female fighter pilot from the UAE, I believe. And for those of us in the United States who are aware of what Fox News actually is, we look at that and we say, well, he's a sexist pig and an idiot, but nobody really takes him seriously. The problem is that that's Fox News to some extent does represent United States interests around the world. People around the world will be given access to this material, and there have already been claims that ISIS, which is the major terrorist group that the United States is combating right now, there's already evidence that says that they are using this statement, this clip, to justify their fight against the West, saying that we are no different. We are just as misogynistic and just as disrespectful to women. And to a certain extent, he's true. I think that Bowling is not quite as bad, but he is certainly not any kind of role model in the treatment of women. But they do have something of a point, because that is what he said is very sexist, and he has not been fired. Fox News has stood by him as of right now, as of recording, when I think that he should have been fired on the spot. That should have been it. It's particularly because in the same program, just shortly before, he criticized Obama for saluting Marines as he got off of, I think it was Air Force One, with a latte in his hand. He said that is unpatriotic, it's disrespectful to the people who put their lives in the line of service. To have that sort of hypocrisy on a single show, and to have such a terrible representation of Western culture in general, and to have that sort of sexism be condoned by Fox News is terrible. Now, at the same time, unfortunately, well, I guess I shouldn't say unfortunately, I do have to support his right to free speech. And I can't say that, it should be censored, and that just because it will be taken poorly by our foreign enemies that he said this, he shouldn't be allowed to say it. That's not how it works. He does have the right to say it. But nevertheless, I think it's irresponsible. I think it's reckless of Fox News to allow that sort of thing to go on and to condone it by keeping him on, by not firing him. So I think that that's another way that Fox News is dangerous to the United States. Alright, so the previous tenet was pretty much all related to misinformation, or at least to poorly portraying Western values to foreigners. The second tenet that I'm going to bring up is a little bit more abstract, and that is that Fox News promotes fear-mongering. It might not seem obvious immediately why this is a bad thing, but I'm going to explain my viewpoint on it right now. So Fox News has the tendency of bringing people who I would describe as lunatics, but people who might more generously be described as having fringe views. And they invite them onto their show, and they give them airtime, they give them a platform to spew whatever nonsense they're promoting. And then they're basically considered to be mainstream just because they have access to this high-level cable show that millions of people watch. And those lunatics, those fringe-type people, when they get onto that whatever show they happen to be on, they will often say things like Alex Jones said, for example, that Obama's going to take the guns, and Hitler took the guns, and Stalin took the guns, and so on and so forth. Or, Rand Paul going on and saying, oh, well, we should have no laws, and Sarah Palin going on saying, oh, there's going to be death panels about Obamacare, and blah, 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 whatever. When they say kinds of things like that, without any sort of actual, true, real balance, to say, no, everything that you're saying is ridiculous, people are more likely to take it as fact. And again, that goes back to the misinformation part. And when they hear that their world is so dangerous, that Obama is about to turn our country into a socialistic, communistic, fascist, evil empire, and that he's going to take all the guns and he's going to put death panels into place, and people are going to get locked up into FEMA camps and all the other ridiculous nonsense that gets spewed from time to time on Fox News, they get scared, and rightfully so. If those things were actually happening, it would be quite scary. But when people get scared, what do? They don't reach out to other people to try and help those other people. They grab everything that they can and then hold it to themselves, and they withdraw from society because they believe that society has nothing to offer them. And while that's not true, it also has the damaging effect that the other people who do actually need help are unable to get it, because those who have stuff, who have money, who have power, or whatever, they just cling on to what they have, fearful that they're going to lose it. Now, if society is not as scary and people are more willing to give away some of what they have so that others may benefit and live a better life and contribute more to society, then society gets better on the whole. The other symptom of this fear-mongering is that, and this kind of goes to some of the individual cases that I've heard of now. I understand that anecdotal evidence is not really reliable, but it does seem to be a trend that has been continuing. So I mentioned earlier that people will cling to their guns, for example, because they think that Obama's going to come and take them. So they stockpile all these weapons, and everybody goes out and buys weapons. Well, that's bad, because some fraction of the population has mental health issues, and the other fractions of the population will commit errors, or their weapons will be stolen, and so on. So you have all these guns floating around, and what ends up happening? Well, I heard a story recently from Michigan where there was a road rage incident. It was a mother and a father on their way to pick up their kids from daycare, and there was a road rage incident with a truck, and they came up to a stoplight. So the father got out, walked up to the truck driver's window, and with his hands out, kind of like, what the hell are you doing? And the truck driver, without saying anything, pulled a gun out and shot him in the face. Now, I can't say for sure what was going through his mind, but it's not hard for me to imagine that this man was fearful. And he was an elderly man. It wouldn't surprise me if he was avidly watching Fox News, particularly since he was clearly a gun owner. And I feel that, and again, I have almost no evidence to support this, but I just want to throw it out there to see what anybody else thinks. I feel that when people are so afraid, they are unwilling to talk with people. They're more likely to shoot and ask questions later. And I think to some extent that has contributed to the ever-rising number of gun violence and gun deaths. And while I won't say that Fox News is directly responsible for that, I do think that they'd have to take some responsibility for promoting the myths about Obama coming to take the guns, for giving Alex Jones a platform, and for constantly making the world look like it is such a dangerous place that everybody needs to have a gun just to protect themselves and their families. That is not the truth. It is not even close to the truth. If this were like Pakistan or or like Darfur or some war-torn African country, then yeah, that might be true. But this is the United States. You don't need guns to defend your family in most places. So the third tenet that I'm going to discuss is one that's been thoroughly documented. I'm not going to bother presenting evidence for it. If you're really interested, I'm sure you just have to look it up on YouTube. I'm sure that if you watch any episode that Jon Stewart or John Oliver does about Fox News, you will see some of this on display. But Fox News is blatantly racist, it's blatantly homophobic, and it's blatantly misogynistic. For example, one of the recent things that Fox News had on criticizing President Obama is that he did the latte salute. Well, George Bush did a salute with a dog in his hand. It's basically the same thing. And so what happened? What did Fox News do when Bush did it? Well, nothing. There was no outrage back then. But when Obama does it, oh, it's like the world's coming to an end. He just so thoroughly disrespected the troops that he should be impeached on the spot. So that's ridiculous, and it's hypocritical, and the only explanation that I can come up with is that he's black, because they did hate Clinton, they didn't hate him with such fervor. And it's not hard to find examples of people who go on and say racist things about blacks and about Hispanics and about Asians and so on and so forth. I mean, I'm sure that it's not difficult to find comments by the anchors themselves that verify the racism. And as for homophobia, the same thing applies. They all have pastors and reverends and bishops and so on and so forth who will go up there and say that homosexuality is an abomination and that it should be outlawed or they should be stoned, depending on how radical this particular holy man is. And it's silly. I mean, I think there's something like 1,500 species in which homosexual behavior has been documented in the wild. It's not like this is some unusual evil thing. I mean, why, if Satan is trying to bring these people to hell, why does he bother with the lions and bears and all the other 1,500 species that do it? Why does he care? It's ridiculous. It is a ridiculous claim, and Fox News constantly perpetrates it. It perpetuates it. It puts it out there like it's mainstream and like, they have some legitimacy to what they're saying when really they don't. And as for misogyny, all I have to say is Eric Bolling and his boobs on the ground comment that is so disrespectful, not only to that pilot as a service person, but to that woman who, coming from the UAE, she was only allowed to become a fighter pilot recently. She waited 10 years for that ban to be removed. And so to belittle her contribution like that is terrible. And, I'm sure, like I said, all you have to do is go on to YouTube and look up Fox News misogyny. You will find thousands of instances. So if you've stuck around, some of you might be thinking, well, come on, there has to be more dangerous threats to the United States and to our government, to our democracy, than Fox News. And at the time that I'm recording this, the most major opponent, I guess you would say, to the United States is ISIS in Iraq and Syria. And while they do appear to be dangerous, and I'm not saying that they are not a threat, I don't think that they constitute as great a threat as Fox News, and I'm going to explain why. Despite primarily Republican rhetoric, although there have been several Democrats who have come out and said something similar, it doesn't seem to me that they have any real capability to strike here in the U.S. They are currently fighting wars against basically everybody in the Middle East, not to mention the United States. I've seen no credible intelligence or reports, and now granted I'm not being exposed to like up-to-date stuff, but I haven't heard anybody come out and say, well, they planned to attack, they planned to send people over. they were going to, bring box cutters, or they were going to hijack planes. There's none of that. Yes, they will kill people in their area, and they will kill U.S. journalists in their area. And I'm not saying that that's not a tragedy, but to the American people at large and to our government in general, I don't feel that they pose much of a threat. They could in the near future, of course. I mean, things are always changing, but at the moment it doesn't seem like it. I'll also add that ISIS has killed far fewer Americans than Americans have killed Americans with their guns. I mean, just look at the past year, and there have probably been thousands of people killed. I don't think that I'm exaggerating that. And I saw a statistic recently that says that more Americans have been killed by guns in America than have been killed in all the wars fought by the U.S. ever. And since the number of people killed by guns since 1964 is greater than the number killed in all of the wars that we have ever fought. That is ridiculous. America has become its own greatest threat. The other thing I'll say about ISIS, and this is kind of almost like a backhanded compliment, I guess, because they are so dangerous. They have forced Nouri al-Maliki, who was the previous prime minister of Iraq, and who was basically just somebody that Bush and his administration pulled out of a hat. They forced him out of office and demanded that Iraq install an inclusive government, one that will work together between the different denominations of Islam to fight ISIS. So while ISIS is dangerous, it has also encouraged some positive developments in our relationship to Iraq and Iraq's government's relationship to its people. Finally, to some certain extent, ISIS has allied Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and several of the other powers in the Middle East with us. That is very unusual. When ISIS first started attacking and became more, not popular, but more well-known, Iran offered to work with the U.S. to fight them. Iran has not offered to help us with anything since the revolution, I think it was in 1978. And they have also offered to work with Saudi Arabia and the UAE and Iraq. Iran and Iraq have fought 2 wars since, I think, 1978. I think there was one in the early 80s and then again in the later 90s. I can't quite remember. I do believe they fought 2 wars, and they were bloody. They were bloody conflicts. And yet here they are trying to work together against ISIS. So, yes, ISIS is dangerous, and it's certainly a threat that the United States needs to look at. But at the same time, I don't think that it poses as much of a threat to our democracy as Fox News. Again, just the misinformation that Fox News peddles, I think, is more than enough to qualify it as being the most dangerous and destructive entity facing America today. So, I know that's a little bit of a radical claim. I think I've made a pretty good case for it, but if you disagree, or if you agree and wanted to add more, please go ahead and comment down below. I'll try and respond to them as I get them. I hope that you liked this video. If you did, check out some of my others. Some are not political, some are more scientific, some are more religious, and this one touched a little bit on religion, but not too much. So I hope that you like, and if you like what I do, subscribe, and thank you very much.